How does the new Karen Kingsbury film, Someone Like You, have the potential to restore your heart? That's the topic we're going to be addressing today on Flourish-Meant. I'm your host, Tina Yeager. Today, I have a very esteemed guest, and I'm so honored to have her on the show today, Karen Kingsbury. She's a #1 New York Times best-selling author. She's known as America's favorite inspirational storyteller. She has more than 25 million copies of her award-winning books in print, and her last dozen titles have topped bestseller lists. Many of her novels have actually been made already into major motion pictures, but now Karen Kingsbury Productions has their first theatrical feature, Someone Like You. And her Baxter family books were also developed into a TV series that is airing this spring. And Karen is also an adjunct professor of writing at Liberty University. She lives in Tennessee with her family. So let's dive in with Karen about how this film has the power to restore hearts. Welcome, Karen. I am so thrilled to have you on Flourish-Meant today.
Oh, thank you, Tina. It's such a great honor to be with you today.
In the second half of our conversation, can you begin with talking about which parts of this movie were difficult for you to write? Was it the suffering pieces? Were there pieces about someone's death? What was the most difficult piece for you to tackle as an author and as a screenwriter?
I think it was trying to figure out which part to cut because you can't have 100,000 words are not going to work onto the screen. So, right away it was obvious that the answer had to be, we had to cut some of London's story because, suffice it to say, you could just feel the tension when he says, I've been praying for you early on. And if she's a match, she's going to give a kidney to her mom who's sick. And Dawson's so happy for her. And he says, wow, I've been praying. And she bristles. And she says, well, prayer didn't do that. I've been a match since I was born. So she's pushing back, writing her character where we understand that she's got struggles in her faith, but we cut so much of, because she lives several days in the book in the hospital before she passes. So there's conversations that aren't in the movie. So that was a tricky, that's just like part of the kind of, I guess, mechanics of taking a book and turning it into a movie. But, it was one of the saddest things for me. And I love writing sad scenes, so I don't mind it. When Dawson, who's been in love with this girl for 10 years, but it's never been reciprocated. It's just been friendship. When her face is as familiar to him as his own, and he finds this other embryo looking for a brother or sister of London's and finds a sister and goes to the zoo where she works and walks up to her and says, can we talk? And she just looks at him and says, who are you? And I just, it's like a gut-wrenching moment to me of like, poor Dawson, because he is so broken and lost his friend. And he just like, there's a natural sort of sense that because she looks so much like London, that she's going to know him, and she doesn't know him. And it's just like that, that sadness of that. And then I think the hardest scene probably too, and to make sure we pulled it off right, was the two moms meeting at the end of the movie. And that was Robin Lively's first day on set. It was Lynn Collins' last day on set. We only have these actors, you get them for like 4 or 5 days at a time. So you have to figure out a way to make that work. And, they were so gracious with their acting, and they believed Tyler Russell, our director, they believed him and trusted him. And you would have never known. Those two, it seemed like, the connection and the chemistry, and you've got 50 people around and lights, and it's so much happening. And yet we have this intimate, beautiful moment. I honestly felt like it was a miracle, but it was a hard scene to write. Again, you're limited in time. And I also believe in not overwriting scripts. I don't like scripts that are overwritten, where people are saying too much what the actors act. So that scene we had to pick just the right words, and they brought beautiful performances.
Can you talk about some of your favorite miracle stories from producing this film?
Oh my goodness, there were so many. One for sure was the health factor, because we were still living in a time when you had to have COVID compliance officers on set if you wanted to have a SAG movie. And we did want SAG because we weren't looking to hire people we just necessarily new or, whatever. We wanted people who could act. I would say the miracle of having these COVID, they almost felt like just like police officers on set, and they weren't aligned with us faith-wise. And I did a little deeper dive and found out they're not allowed to ask you if you've had COVID. And if you hadn't had COVID in like 40 days, before, you didn't have to do the testing. So anyway, and I basically said to my actors, I'm going to leave it up to you. If you want to test, you can test. That was where we were at. That was legal. And if you don't want to test, you don't have to. And they chose not to, and everyone stayed healthy. That was a miracle in the midst of all that, because you get one test positive or someone sick and you're closed down for 10 days. And I would have lost the actors. That would have been that. And you still have to pay them. So that was one of the biggest risks and miracles. And again, because our schedule was so tight, the way the weather was, God gave us perfect weather for every day. Another miracle was we only could get the lake house, this gorgeous glass house where Dawson lives, the architect. And it's just so stunning in the movie. And we could only get it for 4 days in November. So we backed our schedule out from there. That was going to be our last week of shooting. Well, November is often rainy. You don't really know what you're going to get in November to put people out on jet skis on the lake. So that was a trick, but the bigger trick was getting jet skis. Nobody wants to, there's all the places that would rent watercraft were all closed by November. So we were just looking and couldn't figure out, we were thinking we were going to need to make those canoes, which we desperately did not want to do, when I had a friend call me and she said, I was talking to a friend the other day, and that friend has a friend who lives on Smith Lake, and they just got 2 brand new jet skis, and they love your books, and they would like to be able to let you use them for free. Isn't that amazing? Like, it was just miracle after miracle. It was incredible. And we just kept feeling like God was parting the Red Sea as we walked step by step. And he didn't even let us get our toes wet. We would get right to the water's edge of not knowing what to do or how it was going to go, and he would part the water a little more. We just kept taking that faith walk, and he kept providing.
Did you see an impact from the movie and the production of the film on the people who were actually working for the production of the film?
Yes, absolutely. Again, having never done this before, and we paid for the whole thing so we could make the decisions. I said, I would rather have our home be the production office. And that's unusual. Nobody does that. And we have a big enough home. I thought, let's just do it. So I think initially that might have been a weird thing for people, but I wanted to read a little devotion over them every day and feed them really well. And I wanted them to feel like they were part of our family, because it's a family project. As we went along, they loved that so much. And really, I kept hearing over and over again, like, I've never been on a set like this. Like, pre-production was in our home, but then once we got to the movie set itself, we were in different locations, every couple of days. And so at that point, Tyler, the director, took over, and he would pray for them every day. And we kept saying the same thing. We kept saying, look, we're inviting God to help us make this movie. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, we want you to know you're loved. So you don't know. I mean, the world could end. Like, we don't know if this is going to be a movie on a screen someday. We don't know. We can't guarantee that. We're trying for that. This was, back in the fall of 22. But we do know that we have you here with us for these 50 days, pre-production and production. And we want to love you in that process. And we even extended an invitation, if anyone, needs anything, if you have any, any issues, anything, please come to us. And there were different ones who would come and ask for prayer privately. There were people who needed some help with like a car or engine or whatever, and we could just step in and say, let us love you through the process, because then you're being the hands and feet of Jesus in our own. We're flawed, we're not perfect. I'm sure we miss things, but people felt very loved.
I think that comes through in the film, that theme of loving people where they are, from where you are, right in this present moment. That comes up over and over again in all of the spaces, all of the issues that you're addressing in this magnificently beautiful film. It's the cinematography, as you mentioned. It's not a cheap film, it's not a cheesy film, it is well produced. So would you say that because of that element, that is what's touching people both on both sides of the screen?
Yeah, I really believe it is. It was such a labor of love, and we prayed for the people and loved them with and without them. And we prayed all the time about it. And I think that there is just the Spirit of God woven into this movie. It is just truly, you walk away. I mean, I look at the faces, and yeah, they've been crying, but they're so radiant. Like they were touched by something deeply, and it's the Lord. It's truly an offering to him. And I am just thrilled for April 2nd to get here so we can start to hear the stories of what God is doing.
Yes, and it has been a family sacrifice, a family project. How has doing this project, producing this film, impacted and maybe even changed your family?
Well, we look at each other, we always laugh, and we look at each other and we say, how in the world, like who normally does all this? Like right now, the marketing and just letting people know and putting on a premiere and all these things. And it's like, well, usually that's like the 11th floor at Universal, so it's one of those things where I'm so glad that we have each other, because it's been a very thrilling, very exhausting, very, at times you could be tempted to be terrified, but truly with our faith, it's grown us together. It's grown us closer. The journey has been a beautiful ride. Honestly, we are just like, we look at each other and no one will understand it. The other side of this, win or lose, the other side of this, no one's ever going to understand it like we understand it. Like the day that we hired a local producer who brought in the most incredibly talented crew, and she was young and she was just very sharp. And she said, she was going over the budget, like, this is what you're going to need to do, who you'll need to hire early on. And she said, you're going to need a line producer. Now, a line producer is the person who handles like payroll and insurance and SAG. It's a lot of details. I said, just a minute. I walked 50 steps over to our home office where my sister Trish has been my executive assistant for 15 years. And I knocked on the door and I said, Trish, Google line producer, because you're going to be the line producer. We didn't know what we were doing. I mean, Tina, we had no idea how to make a movie. And I felt like every day our prayer was for wisdom from God and favor, because we couldn't do it without his know-how. We had to have his leading, and we also couldn't do it without him opening doors no one else could open.
Wow. So, what is one last thing that you would like to tell the audience about the potential of someone like you to restore hearts?
Take the chance, get the tickets, get them now. We can't stay in theaters more than the first weekend unless people show up early, unless they show up in those early days, that first weekend. So we open April 2nd. I would say, bring a daughter, bring a sister, bring a friend, bring your group, because this is a movie that you're going to just end up wanting to hug each other after, and just, it's going to open up some places in your heart that needed healing, and you're going to walk out feeling like that happened.
So, what's next for you, Karen? Do you have plans for something next, or are you so focused on the film that you don't even want to think about what's coming next?
Well, it's funny. For 5 years, the Baxters, my TV show, or the Baxters were made into 3 seasons of a TV show, and there's lots more to be made. And it was just sitting on a shelf. And this last few months, we found out that Amazon Prime Video is airing that on March 28th, 5 days before the movie comes out. So it's a super fun and crazy busy time. Like there's a Baxter's billboard on Sunset Boulevard right now. So we're going to kind of walk through this. I think if it does as well as we think it will do, then I would love to be involved in the writing of that, and see our director, for someone like you, potentially step in and do some directing for the Baxters. And then we're working on, either we're toying between a couple different titles, depending on how well someone like you does. I'd love to do Just Once, which has some sections of it will be World War II. So it's going to need a higher budget. But I've got another novel that I need to write and want to write too, that's coming, that is called Where the Sea Meets the Sky. And it's got some, it's a love story, but it's also got some real intrigue in it as well, and some danger, and kind of that message that God is with you in your dangerous places as well.
I love that message. How can people get advance tickets, stay connected with someone like you and Karen Kingsbury?
The best way is to go to the movie website. You can get your tickets anywhere tickets are sold right now. Fandango, Atom Tickets. You can go to our distributor Fathom and get tickets. Fathom used to only do events. This is an actual distribution. So we have a guaranteed 5 or 6 days. But if you want us to stay in theaters, you got to get your tickets now. And you can really do that at someonelikeYou.movie. and you can see the trailer, get your tickets. You can also get the group study, the Bible study, the discussion guides, and check out, some of our shareable pieces and share that with your family and friends, and maybe even share the hope where you buy a ticket for someone else.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being on Flourish-Meant today. It has been a privilege, and I hope that all of you are inspired to go see for yourselves the restorative potential for your own hearts, for your family's hearts, for your neighborhood's hearts, and for maybe even your church community's hearts in the movie, the spectacular movie, Someone Like You. And of course, I also hope that you hit subscribe and come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.